Hey people, it's me again. So anyways, I'm just sitting out here in the backyard as far as that goes. So one of the things that I had talked about pretty often here is how certain people that deal with the fact that I'm on the spectrum and all that kind of stuff, you know. And there's always been some sort of misunderstandings, miscommunications on either end at that point, you know. But as far as that goes, that certain people just need to be a bit more patient with people like me, because we're not going to be able to try to string all the right words together at that point in the right affliction context or whatnot, you know what I mean? And it just takes a while there, and some people just need to realize that you take that sort of thing for granted as far as taking things like that off the cuff, or, you know, as far as that goes. I can recall at one point, and it was maybe about at least about 20 years ago or so, about how it was difficult for me to want to do something like order a pizza and call like the restaurant and all that, because I did not really know what I'm supposed to say to that person on the other end about what it is I wanted to order and all that sort of stuff, you know. And I think Dad had gotten annoyed with me on some occasions, you know, and telling me, well, why should I do it when you can't do it yourself? And it was something to that effect about like reordering my prescriptions or something like that, you know. But it was the fact that I had to talk to somebody in order to do that kind of stuff there. But that was kind of one of the things there. And in some ways, when it came to other stuff there, you know, I was never really like emotionless and all that, but I just appeared that way to help cope with this emotional hypersensitivity in some ways, you know. And it was the same way when it came to like hypersensitivity as far as the situational settings, as well as just general sensory overload and all that kind of stuff. Even though like I was well more equipped with doing that now, but a lot of times I think when I had sensory overload, that I would just stop and be like zoned out in some shape or form of that sort, you know. But in some ways there was like my imagination had some way of trying to cope with all that, you know, because I could remember at one point where I was pretending about Power Rangers of some sort, where I had like some, I think it was what I refer to it was like a universal morpher of that sort, and like pretended that it would randomly go off in some ways, and I think it pretended like it randomly went off when I was in like Las Vegas at one time, and I was having a sensory overload at one point, you know. But it was sort of a way to explain the feeling that I had when I had a sensory overload at that point, where I just had that general discomfort, you know what I mean? But as far as like other things, you know, that if I was uncomfortable with speaking about a certain subject or whatever it was, that I just wish that certain people would have just respected that sort of thing and not pry into me that further and all them, because a lot of times I had lashed out on certain people at that point, as far as that goes. But when it came to like the things where I wanted to say no to somebody, but did not know how to say no in a nicer way at that point, that they can get it through their head of that sort without hurting their feelings of that sort. And a lot of times I didn't really mean to hurt their feelings or whatever it is, or say something uncouth about it, but a lot of times I think I just wanted to get my point across about certain things, that I was never really wanting to harm that person physically or whatever it was, but I just wanted them to back off about certain things of that sort, when it came to like that whole story about me using Uber or Lyft, and then how Dad had gotten upset with me over this sort of thing, and I had threatened to kill him at that point if he took away my ability to use Uber or Lyft at that point, But as far as that goes, I didn't really have to go out there too much, but it was just simply Uber and Lyft was just in addition to all the other modes of transportation. It was more like a tertiary mode of transportation. My primary mode of transportation would be my family members, and then public transit is a secondary mode of transit, but the Uber and Lyft was like a tertiary mode. I mean, tertiary, that's how it's supposed to be pronounced. But it's one of those things there. And then I can recall, as far as one of the other arguments that I had with my mom, I mean, it was about like at least, was it like 4 years ago there, that I just simply just wanted to get a pair of swimming trunks. I didn't really want her to go around and buy me socks and sandals and a new shirt or whatever it was, when I just simply just wanted a pair of swimming trunks, and that was it. And I just gone ballistic at her for that matter, But as far as that goes, I think certain people just need to realize, especially people who are on the spectrum, it doesn't really mean that they're actually going to hurt them or whatever it is. A lot of times it's just, for me, acting or saying things like that was my way of getting my point across at that point, because they would never really acknowledge that sort of thing if I had done it in a more acceptable manner. You know what I mean? So, as far as that goes, when it came to these sort of things, about it, that sometimes for people like me, is that we have to kind of try to do any way necessary to get our point across at that point, But as far as that goes, it was one of the other things that I had to also say here, when dealing with like hypersensitivity to certain things like that. And a lot of times it's just that I'm just unable to deal with these sort of things like that. It's never really like I have that that I chose not to deal with that. It was just simply because I'm unable to deal with the hypersensitivity, the overstimulation, sensory overload, whatever you may call it in some ways. And a lot of times it's just with people like me on the spectrum here is that we were forced to shut it all off because it's the only way we can deal with that sort of stuff there. You know what I mean? Especially if it's just one setting as far as that goes, on or off, and then it's just like having this sort of thing be either complete total darkness or just having it all blinding light. So which do we rather choose to have? Blinding light like that or total darkness? You know what I mean? As far as that goes. Yeah. And then it's like the other thing I have to kind of point out about when it came to the whole not looking at people in the eye and all that sort of stuff. It really, for me, I just think it just makes me more nervous at that point when people have to look at me in the eye in some ways. And there are certain people that, it's just sort of a way to assert dominance over somebody, as far as that goes, to try to look in their eye and all that. And a lot of it, for me, I just don't really see the importance of eye contact in some ways. And that is just the reason why I also don't look people in the eye, because I just don't really see the importance of it. And I think now is just with the whole thing with the phones and all that, and the fact that there are certain people that really just don't mind that I don't really look at them in the eye and all that. And I realize it's just that I don't really have to do that all the time, or don't really have to do that if I'm uncomfortable with looking at people in the eye. I just see in some ways that it's just a bit intrusive to look people in the eye as far as that goes. I just see it as a bit intrusive to do that. And that, and then it came to certain other people, it's just also that it's just that they're kind of concentrating on a lot of other things at that point about how to say this sort of word or put these sort of words together and all that, and looking at somebody in the eye is the last thing they want to do as far as that goes. You know what I mean? But considering all the other stuff, as I said before about where it was pretending about that whole Power Ranger thing, but when it came to other people that are on the spectrum about having that vivid imagination and all this sort of stuff, it was also another way for me to cope with the stimuli and all this sort of stuff and all this other things, is as far as that goes. I think in some ways there, if I was more eloquently to express certain things at the time, that I didn't necessarily have to be social if I didn't really want to be social, and that I had to be in a certain mood to socialize with certain people, as far as that goes. But I don't really mean to be insulting because of that, because there are certain people that could have bad days and just don't want to talk to people and all that. I mean, that's just fine, But for certain people, is that they would just get all wound up or whatever it is simply because I just don't want to talk to people, And in some ways, it's just that there's just certain people that are just not that social, and that, or at least in the general sense of being social, and that there's just certain people that express their sociability very differently and all that. In this day and age, I can socialize with other people through this phone here, and that'll be kind of fine and all that. You know what I mean? But that's just really what it is, that we can also communicate with others with not having to speak at that point. And especially if all communication is, 90% of communication is nonverbal and all that. But I think as far as that goes with me, that I have a hard time telling what people are feeling, by their facial expression at some point or other. But I think I kind of made up for that sort of stuff by the tone of their voice, because I could tell, that someone is annoyed with me by the way they're talking to me, or they want something from me, or whatever it is, by the tone of their voice. And that was sort of the way how I had tried to empathize with others by that sort of thing, by focusing on the tone of the voice, or how they say these sort of things, because then I recall at one point where a few years ago where my dad was telling me about one of his friends, how he was married to this one woman, and the woman had divorced his friend, and then his friend had started dating somebody else. And the way how my dad had said it, that he seemed that he liked his friend better with his first wife than the girlfriend of that sort, and then he was implying that maybe that the first wife felt emotionally abandoned, or whatever the case may be. But that was just how he applied it in some ways. But it wasn't really like that's what it was, but that was just how he implied. You know what I mean? But as far as all the other stuff there, that sometimes I felt like I need to go around and say things that were kind of uncouth or whatever it is, because I couldn't really just bottle up all these sort of emotions at the time, But a lot of times, as it is the case, some people just need to realize that when it comes to people on the spectrum, if they act this sort of way, uncouth or whatever it is, it's a lot of times it's just simply trying to get their point across, because sometimes, there are just certain people that are just way too in themselves to notice that they're not the star of the world. They're just merely just an insignificant little speck in this world. And there's all these other people out here who have to share this planet, universe, whatnot, and that's just basically it, and then you can't really just go around and judge people just solely based on the outer appearances and all of that, when there's just completely more to that person than just their conditions, immutable traits and whatnot, and that sort of thing, you know what I mean? So anyways, I guess that's probably it. Until